One morning, a global alert flashed: your next breath requires payment, not a joke, not a drill, a literal oxygen tax had begun. What you're about to find out is how humanity adapted to this terrifying reality, and why it's a future we must avoid. The air, once free, was now privatized. Global atmospheric filtration plants, owned by a single consortium, demanded payment. Every single gasp of air became a transaction. A brutal biological debt crisis began that very day. Remember the alert? How could an essential element like oxygen be owned? The answer is more chilling than you imagine. It started with atmospheric stabilization. Then, purification for optimal health. They promised clean air, nobody read the fine print. The initial phase was voluntary, then mandatory. Suddenly, our very breath was tied to a daily, invisible ledger. The oxygen concentration that kills you is lower than some hospital rooms, but what happens when that level costs you everything? This led to the Great Breath Rationing. Families calculated breaths per hour, children learned to take shallow, economical gasps. Labor became directly linked to breathing credits. No work, no oxygen, poverty became a literal death sentence. Here's the part that sounds made up, but isn't. Some people started selling their exhaled carbon dioxide for credits. They called them carbon farmers. A desperate, biological barter system born from pure necessity. Protests erupted, of course, but how do you fight when the very air you need to shout is controlled? The corporate response was swift: oxygen is a service, not a right, pay your dues or face biological repossession. Entire cities became oxygen zones. The rich breathed deep, the poor barely survived. Oxygen-rich districts thrived, but just beyond their invisible borders, the air was thin, carrying a constant, deadly hum. Physiological horror became widespread. Chronic oxygen deprivation led to brain damage, organ failure, and shortened lifespans. The human brain, starved for oxygen, began to exhibit strange, unpredictable behaviors. What they saw next was disturbing. Mass hallucinations, collective delusions. Some claimed to see air angels guiding them to free oxygen pockets. Others became oxygen prospectors, convinced that hidden underground vents still offered untouched, free air. The consortium allowed these myths to persist. It kept the desperate busy, distracted from the true source of their misery. The constant pressure of the ticking credit meter created an unprecedented level of global anxiety. Social structures fractured, trust eroded, everyone was a potential competitor for the next breath. Black markets flourished, stolen oxygen tanks, diluted air, even forged breathing credits became major commodities. What I haven't told you yet is the part that makes everything worse. This wasn't just about money. The consortium wasn't just selling air, they were selling control of minds, bodies, and societies. They introduced enhanced breathing programs. Mandatory implants monitored oxygen intake, ensuring compliance. These implants didn't just measure, they could subtly reduce oxygen flow to non-compliant citizens. Imagine an invisible leash, controlling your energy, your thoughts, your very will to resist. The ultimate form of oppression, regulating the most fundamental act of life itself. Entire regions, deemed low productivity, were slowly starved of oxygen, their populations dwindling. This wasn't just economic, it was systematic, biological genocide, and the world watched. The rich lived in climate-controlled, oxygen-rich bunkers, disconnected from the dying world above. They called themselves the Oxy Elite. Their children grew up never knowing the fear of a shallow breath. But even for them, there was a hidden cost, a deeper, more insidious consequence of their manufactured purity. Their immune systems, never challenged by natural air, became incredibly fragile. A common cold became deadly. The pure air wasn't making them stronger, it was making them vulnerable, a chilling irony. But humanity, even when throttled, finds a way. Resistance movements formed, operating in the shadows. They scavenged for ancient technology, trying to build their own, unregulated oxygen sources. Some discovered untouched forests in remote, forgotten corners of the world, pockets of true freedom. These breath sanctuaries became whispered legends, destinations for those desperate enough to risk everything. But the journey was perilous. Oxygen debt collectors patrolled the routes, preying on the weak. And here's where it gets truly unsettling: the consortium started genetically modifying flora. These plants produced oxygen, yes, but they also subtly released a neurotoxin that made people docile. Happy air, they called it, a terrifying blend of control and manufactured contentment. The ultimate goal wasn't just to sell oxygen, it was to pacify an entire planet. This was the true horror of the oxygen tax, not just the physical cost, but the cost of free will. What would you do in such a world? Fight for your breath, or surrender to the happy air? Resistance groups, those untouched by the neurotoxin, began desperate acts of sabotage. They sought out pre-tax flora, cultivating them in secret labs, hoping to restore natural oxygen. These plants were humanity's last hope, a biological rebellion against the corporate stranglehold. Their plan, mass dispersal of these spores into the atmosphere, bypassing the filtration plants. The consortium caught wind of it. They deployed atmospheric suppressors, giant drones designed to incinerate spores. A desperate aerial battle began, humanity's last gasp for freedom against overwhelming technological might. Some spores made it through. Tiny pockets of natural oxygen began to appear in unexpected places. A glimmer of hope, a taste of true, unburdened air, the taste of freedom. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in generations, humanity dared to dream of a world without debt. A future where every breath wasn't a transaction, a reminder of what we once took for granted. This story is a stark warning: the air we breathe is a global commons, not a commodity. Protecting our atmosphere is protecting ourselves, our freedom, our very existence. Because the day we pay to breathe is the day we lose everything. Imagine a world where the air itself has a price tag. That's not science fiction. It's the chilling reality of the oxygen tax, a terrifying biological debt crisis nobody predicted. The atmosphere, once a shared resource, was privatized overnight. Every breath became a transaction. Work for credits, or suffocate. Poverty became a literal death sentence. What happened next was even worse: a global health catastrophe. Chronic oxygen deprivation led to widespread brain damage, organ failure, and shortened lifespans. People began experiencing mass hallucinations, driven by oxygen starvation. Some claimed air angels guided them to free oxygen pockets. Others became oxygen prospectors, convinced hidden underground vents held untaxed air. These myths, however strange, offered a desperate hope. The consortium also introduced enhanced breathing programs with mandatory implants. These implants didn't just monitor, they could subtly reduce oxygen flow to non-compliant citizens. Imagine an invisible leash, controlling your energy, your thoughts, your very will to resist. This was the true horror: total control, regulating the most fundamental act of life. But humanity fought back. Resistance groups formed, seeking out natural, untaxed oxygen sources. They discovered untouched forests, breath sanctuaries, offering true freedom. And here's the part that sounds like a movie: they found ancient seeds. Seeds capable of producing oxygen without the neurotoxins the consortium used. Their plan: mass dispersal, a biological rebellion against the corporate stranglehold. The consortium deployed atmospheric suppressors. But some spores made it through. Pockets of natural oxygen appeared, a glimmer of hope, the taste of freedom. This isn't just a story, it's a warning: our air is a global commons, not a commodity. The day we pay to breathe is the day we lose everything that makes us human. Protect your breath, protect your freedom, it's the most valuable thing you own.